Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is Saima Dhillon. You're watching me on Heart to Heart with Saima, the podcast show for people who are searching for that courageous person who is within all of us and who's waiting for an opportunity to come out and people who are wanting to be inspired by listening to stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Um, this is Saima Dhillon, your host. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. And without waiting anymore, let's dive right into the show. My guest tonight, Rachel Druckenmiller, is on a mission to humanize the workplace by igniting resilience, connection, engagement, and compassion in organizations, leaders, and teams. Recognized by Forbes as a next 1000 honoree in 2021, the number one health promotional professional in the US in 2015, a 40 under 40 game changer in 2019, and one of the daily records leading women of 2020. Rachel is a national thought leader in the field of employee engagement and well-being. So without waiting anymore, let me bring this amazing woman over here. Good evening, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. I've got my heart to heart shirt going on here. So,
I see that. Thank you.
being on brand.
I see that. Rachel, uh, I shared a little bit about you, but how about I hand over the screen to you and give you a chance to just share, your journey with us.
Yeah. So gosh, about 2.5 years ago, I left a corporate career of 13 years, full-time job. Sometimes we have these aspirations of like, I think I want to do this thing, but it feels really scary and I'm not sure. And my parents are both entrepreneurs, and so I grew up watching them do work that they loved and thought that was normal. I'm the oldest of three children. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and I grew up. I was always very ambitious, always very curious. Had creativity to me that I didn't always necessarily display. I wasn't all that expressive growing up in terms of, energetically expressive, vocally, all that expressive, sharing writing or singing. I just didn't, really do a lot of that kind of stuff. And, I had an awakening moment when I spent a semester abroad in southern Spain, in Granada, in college. And that experience changed me. I think we have these like catalytic moments that happen where we have an experience and we're different, and I came back from that experience and I was different. I had seen I lived in another country, been immersed in another culture. There was a certain aliveness to that environment. And, I feel like that was the beginning of me becoming a bit more courageous, becoming more outgoing, becoming a bit more adventurous. And, and that was, yeah, at this point, gosh, like almost 20 years ago. And, I've just carried some of that through with me. And there's been this gradual, I'd say, like, emergence of who I feel like I've probably always been, but maybe didn't feel comfortable showing up in the world the way that I do now, where I'm more expressive, singing, on LinkedIn and putting myself out there more, and taking the leap of faith and start my own business. And married to my college sweetheart. We've been together for 16 years.
Wow.
And he's an elementary school teacher and is really wonderful with children. He has levels of patience I don't think I will ever possess. But so, those are some. I mean, we'll talk about a bunch of other stuff. I'm sure there've been lots of highs and lots of lows along that journey, but that's kind of like, that's how we got here, I would say.
And I think that's what life is, right? Life is just a series of different experiences, and I think we are meant to evolve, and we are meant to embrace those different experiences. Because I think when we don't embrace change, and we don't embrace the different things which are being flashed in front of us, I think at that point, A, we start becoming stagnant, and B, life will force you and put you in these circumstances and force you to change if you don't do it yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really, I think it's interesting because I feel like I view a lot of these things as invitations and opportunities, and we can choose
Yeah.
to say no or we can choose to say yes. And I think we all have experiences where there's an invitation that might be a challenge.
Yeah.
That could be an opportunity to grow, to try something different, to do something new. And I think sometimes we choose to say yes to those. Whether it's a confident yes or an uncertain yes, it can vary. And then other times I think we say no or we say not yet. We say like this is not the time. I mean, like I thought I thought about leaving my job in 2012. I didn't leave my job until 2019. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a while to have that thought. But I was taking steps to move toward it. That was the thing, is I knew that it was a not yet. And I really would have, I would have left prematurely if I had left when I first had the thought to leave.
So do you feel that in retrospect now, that when you reflect back, you feel that you did leave at the right time?
Oh, absolutely. Left at the right time. I left at the exact right time. I mean, I wouldn't change. I left at the exact right time. I left on good terms, where we had like, they had a really generous like celebration send off. They had a luncheon for me. I got to pick the menu. I got to, say where I wanted the cake to be ordered from, like my favorite bakery in Baltimore. And they invited my husband and they invited my parents. And they gave me this signed picture with everyone had written notes around it. So I mean, not everyone has that kind of a send off. And granted, I had been working at this company. I started as an intern in 2003,
Wow.
and I didn't leave until September of 2019. So I mean, I grew up. I grew up at this place. These people watched me grow up. They watched me go off to college. They watched me get married and come into my own. And there's something special about growing up with a community of people.
Absolutely. So you made that transition, and so that brought you to Unmuted,
Mm-hmm.
your company, and that you started. So what is Unmuted about?
Well, I think a lot of us, it's funny, I wrote about it in journals back in like 2015. I'm a journaler. You do like journaling?
My mentor was really encouraging us, and I kind of tried. I have it open on my window screen to kind of open Google Doc and, write every evening, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I just doze off,
Sure.
and, it
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
Just curious. I mean, I don't have any type of like formalized practice where like every day I have to do this. It's sitting next to my bed. When I have a thought that comes into my mind, I'll write stuff down in it. When I have something I feel like I want to share, reflect on it. But I have a collection.
It's an absolutely fabulous and fantastic habit to have. And my 20-year-old has that habit, and I feel it's something. It's a great habit to have because it's like a brain dump, moving thoughts from your head onto paper or wherever. So you've kind of unloaded all that pressure and burden, or whatever those thoughts might be. You've moved them, relocated them from your body and your mind onto, in a different place.
Yeah, you become essentially like you get to become an outside observer of your thoughts, which helps
Yeah.
you to process them more clearly, so absolutely. And I think for me, it was always an outlet because I didn't feel comfortable for most of my life, did not feel comfortable being vulnerable in front of people.
Yeah.
For like a very long time, like until about 5 years ago.
And it's not easy to be vulnerable, showing your your wounds and your most things that you're very sensitive about. It's not easy showcasing those.
No, it's not. And different people, based on, your upbringing and what was normalized in your family, culturally, sometimes it can be, something that is more familiar, in terms of, what is most common among the people you spend most of your time with. Are you part of a friend group where people generally share things or people keep things close to the vest? And, for me, it was the experience of, being literally muted. I burned out and got mono in 2017. I lost my voice for a period of time.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how did that happen? Was that from stress or just some emotional trauma?
Probably everything. I mean, for me, it was a lifetime of just pushing myself so hard and not taking adequate breaks, not resourcing myself, not getting the support that I needed, letting myself get to the point where I was just like the straw on the camel's back had broken, and I'm like and I'm like still holding on, like that's just how I existed. I just pushed myself. I mean, I look back at journals that I have. It's almost scary to see some of the stuff I wrote, like in capital letters, in kind of erratic handwriting. I wrote, it was either in 2015 or 2016 in my journal, like, I can't keep going at this pace. This is unsustainable. Like, something's got to give. I was telling myself, like, on these pages, I was telling myself essentially, you're not okay and you can't keep doing this. But I didn't know how to not keep doing it. Like, I had been on this hamster wheel of achievement and performance and for my whole life, starting as a student who got awards and accolades and all that kind of stuff. And so much of my identity was connected to whether or not I could be impressive to people and achieve things and win, like that was where I found a lot of my identity, because I didn't feel like I fit in socially. And so that was a place where I felt some sense of confidence and some sense of worth, frankly, was in
Are
my
you a
ability.
perfectionist?
I have a high, it's funny. My dad's like, if it takes you a long time to answer a question, you're kind of answering the question by taking a long time to delay. But that being said, I have a high bar for excellence. I'm not like, I view the two as different. Like, I don't, if I make a mistake at something, I don't like disintegrate. I freak out for a moment, I pivot, and then I figure it out like in the moment really fast. But I expect that I'm not that I'm going to make mistakes. I don't really like doing it. It does a vulnerability to mess up or to not do something right, but I can live with it. Like, it doesn't destroy me if I make a mistake. But growing up, for sure, I mean, I definitely felt like there was a tremendous amount of pressure, most of which was self-imposed, to be the good girl and to not get in trouble and to follow the rules and to get good grades, and there was no release valve really for me. And so I took those habits with me into adulthood, into the workforce, and got to the point where part of it was I had gotten recognized as the #1 health promotion professional in the United States, in 2015. And then suddenly I had a national platform overnight, basically.
Yeah.
And I, that was amazing because it gave me a national platform, and it led me to put even more pressure on myself to say, like, they said you're the best. You have to keep being the best. You have to have all the answers. You can't struggle. You can't, like, story I told myself. And then it all just kind of crumbled, in the fall of 2016 and into the winter of 2017. And I just completely bottomed out. I mean, I was exhausted. I had swollen lymph nodes, the worst sore throat of my life. I was just beyond fatigued. Fatigue I had never experienced before, ever. Sleeping 12 hours a night for weeks and not feeling rested. I mean, not having my energy, like feeling like my spark had just like disappeared. I mean, it was scary. It was like really losing my voice for a period of time. And
How long did you lose your voice for?
it was intermittent. It was in and out. Like, there was, like a week or two in December of 2016 where, this is absurd, I was doing cooking demos at the time. Part of my prior life was that I'm certified in culinary nutrition. I went through like food safety training. I'm a health coach, and I would go into companies and teach people, as part of my well-being practice, I would teach people how to make nourishing meals. And I used to have a food blog called Rachel's Nourishing Kitchen that still exists, but like I don't post on it anymore. And I was so sick. I'd lost my voice, but I felt this pressure. I told myself I had a cooking demo that I was supposed to do for desserts for this company. And I told myself, your schedule is so full and this client's paying you a monthly retainer. You can't cancel this. You can't postpone this because you won't be able to do it for like 6 or 8 weeks. Suck it up. And so I wrote out a script for my assistant. I had an assistant then, part-time. And she was charismatic. And I typed up a script and I basically made all the food while she described what I was doing. And I look back at that and I think to myself, like, two things. One, the critical part of me is like, what is wrong with you? You should have canceled that or postponed it. They would have understood you were very sick. I didn't know at that a time that I had Epstein-Barr or mono. I didn't know that yet. I didn't find that out for 2 months. But then also I have deep compassion for myself because I think, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that you felt like you couldn't say no to that. Like, I'm sorry that you were so consumed that you could not see any other reality other than you just had to push through and make it happen, even though you were so sick. Like,
was it like you didn't want to disappoint someone else, or didn't want to disappoint yourself, or both?
It was both, but it was more so external. Like, I didn't want the client to be disappointed. I didn't want to get in trouble with my company. I was like, well, they're paying a retainer. If I don't come out and do the event this month, are they going to have to pull back the retainer? And I was like, it's just easier to just go. Like, we convince ourselves of things like this, right? We do things that don't make any logical sense because we tell ourselves some story that we don't ever let anybody else in on. And then we realize later that, like, if we'd processed that with somebody else, we might have ended up in a different outcome.
And 80% of the things that we think about and we stress over, 80% of the things don't end up happening in reality. So again, it depends on an individual's personality. I said that to a friend of mine, and he's an overthinker. So he said, well, for me, that 80% of the things that I am thinking about and making backup plans for, it's just me preparing for every kind of contingency that can happen. And if it happens, then I'm prepared for it. And I was like, but do you not realize that this 80% overthinking, how it's impacting your health? Because his health was just, in shambles.
Yeah, our thoughts 100%, affect our physical health. I mean, there's a book I love that I always have on hand. I should reread it. I read it when I was going through the burnout experience. The Body Keeps the Score.
I just bought that recently. Another guest who came on my show, she suggested the book, so I bought it. I haven't read it yet, but I bought it.
I had it on my shelf for like 2 years before I read it, so don't feel bad. It's like that you read a book when you're meant to read a book, and sometimes if I'm reading a book and I'm not getting into it, I'm like, maybe I'm not supposed to read this book yet, and then I put it aside and I pick it up, and like that's when I needed to to read it. It's like I read it at the time I needed to. I've started to date. One of the things I want to start, I've started doing a little bit, is when I'm reading a book, because I love to underline and highlight, like physical book. And I've started to like date when I make a note in the margin or something, so I can see like what was I going through at the time I was reading this book, so I could have context for why I would have underlined that or why I would have highlighted that. And the book like becomes a secondary journal. It's kind of cool.
Yes, for sure.
So anyway, that's a long roundabout way of getting to, unmuted. For me, it's that for so much of my life, I did mute myself. I muted my body again, like I did with going through that experience. And I had, chronic health issues growing up of ear, nose, and throat infections and acid reflux and strep throat. And I had a half a dozen surgeries by the time I was 16 on my ear, nose, like in my like sinuses and ears. And I have about a 60% hearing loss in my left ear and a gaping hole in my eardrum that's just been there from a bunch of failed surgeries. So, I think what happened in all those situations, I never at any point had any doctor that really got curious about why, like the root cause of why I was having all these symptoms and why I was getting sick so often. And I had to figure that out myself when I was in my late 20s, that it was food intolerances.
Oh, wow.
That were triggering all that. And I cut the foods out and the symptoms went away. And I was like, gosh, I wish I'd known that earlier. Like,
what kind of food allergies did you have, which was impairing your hearing?
yeah. So for me, it was a dairy. So it's not an allergy for me. It's like an intolerance. So for me, it was
Okay.
dairy products. So dairy products can be really congestive. So whenever
Okay.
you have conditions that are like bowel congestion, or people have like skin congestion or things like eczema or irritable bowel syndrome or acid reflux or chronic congestion or sinus issues and ear infections, a lot of times when they remove dairy products from their diet, a lot of those symptoms clear up.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't even know there was a connection between the two. Like I had no idea. And I was the director of well-being. I made up my job in 2007. I was like, I'm going to be a wellness coordinator. I don't know what that person does, but that's what I'm going to be. We didn't have one before, but I'm going to figure out what that person does and justify that you're paying me. And, I met health coaches in 2010 that took us through some different programs where we would do these like detoxes and essentially remove certain like foods from our diet, like dairy and gluten and fish and soy and sugar and alcohol and corn and eggs for a period of time, and notice how your body responded, then gradually reintroduce to see what you might be reactive to. And it was the first winter where I didn't need an Advair disc for bronchitis and didn't get congested. And I was like, I just assumed that I always needed to have a bottle of Mucinex or an Advair disc in the winter. I just assumed that you just deal with that in the winter. And it wasn't until I started to make changes to my diet that I realized, like, oh my gosh, I can remove this thing and my body gets better. This was amazing. And I was on medicine for acid reflux for 10 years and got off of it in my late 20s. Gluten was another food that, I was on a lot of antibiotics as a kid from all those infections I had, and antibiotics jack up your digestive system. And I wasn't ever replenishing, with good bacteria. And so for me, what really got me into so much of this, what really got me into sharing my story, what really got me, and I sometimes disconnect from it now, it's all my health experiences, all the healing experiences I went through food, essentially like using food as medicine to heal myself from chronic health issues that I had for my whole life. And I've started sharing my story. People are like, you should start a blog, like telling people about this stuff that you're experiencing. Like, and I had coworkers that like one discovered she was celiac. Somebody's husband discovered he was celiac through doing this stuff. Different people started to clear up their own health issues as a result of making changes. And I was like, this is so powerful. I have to tell people about it, and that's what prompted me to start a blog in 2013 or 14, even though I didn't know anything about blogging. And that was really me starting to unmute myself. I was starting to share my story and I was starting to put my experiences out there, and I didn't judge the quality. I have to get information out. I took crappy pictures. They were poorly formatted. I didn't have a logo for a year, but a perfectionist would not have done that. A perfectionist would have been like, the logo has to be perfect and all that. I did not. I was like, I have important information. People need to know it.
Like, let's just get started.
Let's just get it out
there.
there.
It should be, you start and you improvise and you make changes as you go.
Right. Yeah. And then a year later I hired a designer and I had her design me a logo and I put it on there and I got business cards and, but that was for me. And that's when I first started sharing my vulnerable stories. Cause at a certain point I had lost weight by doing a program I had brought into my company, a wellness weight loss program I'd brought into my company. Tim's son, hey, he's my producer for my show I just launched on yesterday. And I lost my train of thought for a second. Sorry. I got really excited that he was there. What was I talking about? Launching the blog? Maybe that was it. Pick up from where
you were talking about the blog and we were talking about how if you were a perfectionist, you wouldn't have just
put it out there,
gone with the flow, but you just wanted to put out the nutrition information out there.
Yeah.
So you stopped, you became gluten free, you stopped dairy, your life started to change.
Yeah. And that for me was like, that was like the unmuting of my body. It was like my body. And for everyone, anyone who's listening to this, like our body, let's do the Rachel dance. This is my excited dance I do on their show. Like my body had been sending me signals. Like symptoms are signals that your body sends you, and we can choose to suppress them or we can choose to give them a voice. And my whole life, I was like, suppress, 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 suppress. Medicine, procedure, doctor visit, and then it was like, again, not until my late 20s that I'm like, why is all this happening? Do I have to be sick? Could I feel well? Do I have to be on this medicine forever? Do I always have to get sinus infections? And then it was like I started to open up that there could be another reality. And that was the unmuting of my body. It was like, in addition to Spain and how I started singing in gospel choir in college, it was the unmuting of my physical body through my physical healing that really started to give me the confidence to realize I have a story to share that can help people. And then I started sharing it, and I haven't stopped. And that's where I first started talking. That's what I was talking about. I had lost weight. I was clinically malnourished about 10 years ago. But I got praised for it, especially as a woman, right? You start to lose weight. It was like, oh my gosh, you look so good. Have you lost weight? You look so good. And you like eat it up, right? Feels really good. But my body was not operating properly. Like I lost my menstrual cycle for 7 months. I looked kind of sallow. My body looked like that of a 14-year-old girl, even though I was a 27-year-old woman. And I was concerned, but I was afraid to tell anybody because I'm like, I'm the director of well-being. I can't be unwell. There was like an identity crisis. Like on the surface, people are praising me for losing weight through my own weight loss program that I brought into my company. But behind the scenes, I'm not okay. But I can't tell people because they might judge me. But eventually I started to make some changes, and I went and I got testing done at a doctor, and she told me you're clinically malnourished. Your body's not absorbing nutrients. Like I had to make some significant changes. I started working with a nutritionist, and I gained all the weight back. And it was really hard. And so I had my first keynote in the midst of all of this happening. And my before picture was my really, really skinny picture on Healthy Rachel. And my after picture was when I had gained my weight back and my body was functioning properly. And I wrote a blog post. I remember when I pressed publish, I called it the courage to be vulnerable, my untold story. And it was that I swore I'd never go back and wear those pants again because I had lost my weight and I was keeping it off. Gosh darn it. And that was the most vulnerable publicly I had ever been, honestly. And the response was so supportive. And I think we find that we're more afraid to be vulnerable. But then when we are, people are there. Like people are rooting for you. People want to help then carry and buoy you. And that's what I saw. And I was like, all this story I told myself my whole life, which is that you have to have it together all the time or you're somehow inadequate. Just like suddenly was challenged in a way that had never been challenged before. And I haven't stopped sharing my story since. And I encourage other people to share their stories and to make their messes their messages and to find meaning in things that are hard. And that's the opportunity and invitation that we have.
And I think what happens is when you are presenting yourself as perfection, as perfect, then that's the kind of people you're attracting. Where it's those people where everyone is presenting themselves as social media perfect, right? But then when you start showing your vulnerability and you start showing your authenticity, you might lose that crowd, but then you start attracting a different crowd, people who resonate with you, people who want to fix your crown if it's tilted and they won't even tell you, right? So your tribe changes.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. And I don't think I realized, like, sometimes we think that the people who appear to have it together, it's like, well, they've made it. They figured it out. They're the example, right? What I realized once I started sharing my story is that, like, people had viewed me as unrelatable before because I ate all the things I was supposed to eat and I worked out regularly and I had lost weight and I was, you know, check, 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 check. I was drinking my kale shakes and eating my flax seeds and, all that kind of stuff. Like, I wasn't relatable. And I remember one time, I had a coworker who dead serious goes, Rachel, don't you just want a cheesesteak sometimes? She was like, basically, she was asking is like, are you like real? Like, are you just so perfect all the flipping time that you can be a flipping cheesesteak? Like, that's what she was like,
Yeah.
can I see myself in you? Is like what she was asking,
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, and I love what Tim shared in the chat too. Tim's awesome. Like, just the importance of sharing our journeys. And he's like, I started sharing my cancer journey in June, and so much has changed. And he's connected with like several other people, who've started showing up perspectives on cancer. And Kara Ulker, who's super talented too. It's like when we start to share our stories, we realize, to your point, we draw on all these people that were like, I relate to that. I have my own version of that story. I connect to that. I see myself in you.
Yeah.
Like, now I want to share my story. Like, it's contagious, but when we're all walking around acting like we're fine all the time, we're lying. Like, we're lying, and we're showing up inauthentically, and that gets really exhausting.
And it gives other people courage.
Yes.
They feel that, you know what, her life is not perfect, mine isn't either. You know what, if she can do it, I think I can do it.
Yes.
You get up, you keep going, you smile, you're like, okay, you know what, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah, it does. It's courage is contagious. And it takes practice. I mean, now when people are like, it's so hard to be vulnerable, I'm like, I mean, I've now when you like sort of bottom out, we all have our own versions of what that looks like and feels like.
Yeah.
But like when you bottom out, you realize how much whatever the heck you were doing was not working. And then you're like, well, let me just be honest. Let me see how this goes, because that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
And so I found that, like, I found that it's just,
Sorry.
that's okay. I've found that there's a little bit of an echo.
There was, because I wanted to open it up on Facebook. For whatever reason, when I go live on using StreamYard on Facebook, Facebook puts it under friends setting, and it doesn't. People are not able to see it. So I just went in there to change the setting to public so that it can be viewed by anyone. So when I was trying to do that, you could hear yourself.
Okay. I was like, am I hearing myself talk? No, but that's good. We want people to hear it, so that needs to happen.
You're like, one wasn't enough. There are two of me.
No, it's fine. But anyway, so I just think that what I've learned is that, like, I'm quite comfortable crying in front of people. I think I used to like push it away. Yeah, shout out to StreamYard. I used to try to just, and a lot of people do this when people say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying. We see this happen a lot, right? People apologize for tears. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. This is like, let's celebrate this. Let's not apologize for this. Let's celebrate the fact that you're willing to be in your emotions so much that your body is having a physiological response to what you're feeling. Let's celebrate that, So I know tears make some people uncomfortable. But they're so
part of
therapeutic.
you. Like, it's just a form of expression.
Yeah.
pouring your heart out, and your heart is just, your emotions are being reflected through your eyes in the form of tears. And I think, that's okay too.
Yes, I think so
It's okay
too.
to be yourself. It's all okay.
Yeah. And that's what part of unmuting is too, is like unmuting your emotions, like allowing sadness. So, I mean, I saw a therapist a couple of years ago. I was processing something that had happened in my life with my younger sister had gotten unexpectedly pregnant, and I was processing that. It hit me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I was talking to a therapist trying to process it. And I went in for my first visit, and, my background's in psychology. I'm a pretty self-aware person. So I went in with like, I know this thing in my history affected me this way. And, I coming in and spouting off all the things I know. And then she asked me a question later in the visit. And, when somebody asks you something and it just hits a nerve and something in you just like breaks,
Yeah.
and
You're holding it all back, and someone says something, and you're like, an avalanche of emotions.
that's a very good way of describing what it feels like, an avalanche of emotions. And she did some ninja move and caused that response in me. And the next visit when I came back, she said, so I noticed when you came in last time that when we started the visit, you were, came in as very confident, like almost intimidating. It's very odd for a therapist to tell you you're intimidating. And I probably was. And she goes, but then I saw you soften when I broke. I saw you soften, and I get the sense you don't get to be in that space very often. And she was right. I mean, she was absolutely, I worked in a male dominated industry, in the insurance industry. I was a young woman who I always felt like I had, who looked, this is a gift, no complaining. I look younger than I am. And people treat really passionate young women a certain way in the workplace. And it's not fair. And we're not always heard. And sometimes we're diminished or dismissed. And I you get a little chip on your shoulder about that, that people maybe wouldn't take you as seriously as if I were a dude saying the same stuff. It's frustrating, feeling that way. And, I think I had just gotten so good at building up like that protective armor. And when I was hurt and affected when I was younger, whether it was because my parents were going through a difficult time in their marriage and we moved out with my mom for a period of time, or I was in school, I went to Catholic school, but was never Catholic. And so I didn't get to do all the ceremonies they did. And I always felt like I didn't fit in. I felt left out of things that everybody else got to be a part of. I wasn't invited to certain people's birthday parties that like everybody else was invited to, or everyone would get a Valentine on their desk. And I would be the only kid in the class who didn't get one. Like there were some actual things that happened that really, these mini T traumas, and some, I think, probably bigger traumas that happened along the way that accumulated.
I think everyone needs as well as looks for validation. And when you don't feel validated in your environment, and you don't feel that, hey, you know what, you did good. Hey, you know what, keep it up, keep going. When you don't get that, it kind of just leaves you feeling uncertain, and feeling that perhaps you have to try harder to get that validation.
Yeah. And for me, the validation was always social. Like I always felt validated academically. I always felt validated for my behavior, following the rules, being a good kid, but I rarely felt validated socially. And so I built up a wall, and I built up a protectiveness and an intimidation, and that softness is not something I let myself explore. And at one point I was explaining to my therapist I had all these throat issues, whether it was acid reflux or strep throat or, laryngitis or bronchitis. It was like this part of my body, it's like my throat chakra, like that part of my body was like, felt like it was under attack like my whole life. And she said, well, there's a theory that we store emotions in different parts of the body, and that the throat is where we store sadness. And I can't talk about that without crying, because for so much of my life, I didn't let myself be sad.
Yeah.
I did not let myself be outwardly sad. I was like, you got to pull it together. And so I would be sad in my room by myself. I would be sad on the pages of my journals. I would sometimes be sad to my father, who was my safety net growing up. I mean, he was the safest person besides my teachers that I had in my life, closest person to me who did validate me. But I went through a lot of sadness alone. And now as an adult, I know I don't have to do that. And so one of the things that for me getting unmuted is giving myself permission to experience the spectrum of emotions and inviting other people to experience the spectrum of emotions without judgment and with compassion. And so now if I feel sad, I let myself feel sad and I cry.
And that's okay.
And I
And
tell people and tell my husband and I hug
yeah.
him and
And you have to be compassionate to yourself first.
yeah.
I feel that anything you want to give out or send out to others, you first have to give it to yourself. Self-love, it all comes from self-love, love for yourself,
Yes.
sympathy for yourself, compassion for yourself, understanding for yourself. I think it all begins with yourself.
It does. Yeah. And it once you can offer that genuinely to yourself, you have the capacity to offer that to other people, you
Yeah.
know? And so I feel like because and I'm still healing. We're all still healing. I don't think everyone's like, I'm healed of everything. I figured it all out. Like life
Yeah.
happens, you know.
It's continuously happening.
Yes, it's iterative. Healing is an iterative process, but you can't expedite it, you know? Sometimes we want to like expedite or like
Yeah.
delegate. Can't delegate your healing. Like ain't gonna happen. It's hard. Stuff's messy,
Yeah.
but you can't delegate it. And sometimes that's hard to accept. Especially whenever whatever you're going through feels really heavy and something you haven't gone through before, or maybe it's a diagnosis, like again, like Tim talking about, a cancer diagnosis. I mean, like I can't imagine what that feels like, going through that or getting that news or having to go back for visits and wonder if like, oh, am I in remission? Is it still gone? Like that's got to be so hard. And so when we bring people in with us, it helps us get through it. Like now in my life, I don't go through anything alone. Like I have a business coach, I have a therapist, I have a group of friends, I have a community that I've, connected with here on LinkedIn. I've, my husband, I have my faith, I have a lot of resources that many of which I probably had all along with sort of like Dorothy, click your heels to go home. Like you were already there. You just didn't lean on the people that like you had the resources, you just didn't use them.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's okay too, because
yeah.
it's life is a journey, and you evolve, and like I've recently started telling myself that my certain words like failures or mistakes, they just have this negative connotation,
Mhm.
but they're all just different experiences of life. They might not give you the outcome that you were hoping for, uh, but they were just experiences. And as difficult as some of these experiences might be, and some of these experiences might devastate you, but you still have to, you're going to learn something from it. You're going to just put your pieces back together, and you just have to get up and just keep moving forward in life, one step at a time.
Yeah. And like with what Tim says, like in December, he found out he's cancer free. And so grateful, but it's bringing up so many things for me, so many things I thought I would have thought about when I had cancer. It's made me reevaluate everything in my life. It's like we have these moments where you realize, like, when I think about again, comparative only for the sake of the fact that it was transformational. When I think of going through that burnout experience, it caused me to reevaluate, like is this the job for, like, what is it, what needs to change in my life to make my life work better, because whatever this is not working. And it was,
Yeah.
catalytic for so many things. Ultimately set the foundation for me to realize, like, leaving is happening sooner rather than later. Like, I can't continue to suppress this desire that I have to just speak for a living and not do anything else. And, I don't want to be told what to do anymore. And I don't have to follow other people's rules anymore. And I want to be free. I promised myself, like, if I get my voice back fully, like, I'm going to use it fully, because I had vocal nodules. I had other things before, like right after college, where my voice was strained, and I couldn't use it fully for a couple, for several months. So I've had periods of time where I've gotten laryngitis or lost my voice or gotten vocal nodules, swelling in your vocal cords, or losing it when I had mono. And I'm like, my voice is under attack, and all these ways. And I'm like, which to me means that, like, you are supposed to use this. And so I said, hey, if I'm able to, like, sing fully again and speak fully again, watch out. Like, I'm going to be using this. And so I think it can be such a catalyst for us to shift in ways that without that experience, we might never have shifted, or we might have taken a much longer time to get there. And they're like accelerators we didn't necessarily ask for, but accelerators.
I mean, so much of it, Rachel, even as a child, even when you're in your mother's womb, you're just a sponge, and you're sucking in. You're sucking in just everything from the environment, from your household, from your siblings, from your parents. You're sucking in all that energy, positive as well as negative. And if they are if you're living in a toxic environment, all that energy that you're sucking in, it creates stress. That stress leads to all these autoimmune diseases. And I think one of the biggest things, thank you, Tim. I'm so grateful that you're here tonight with us. So I think one of the worst things that we can do to our children is that toxic environment where parents don't get along with each other, and then kids are just sucking in all that negative energy, and it manifests itself in the form of stress and autoimmune.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I internalized. It's funny. I didn't realize this till my husband and I went to marriage counseling. Like, right. We had to go, our church, if they marry you, you have to go through this, like, their, however, 6 weeks or 7 weeks of their like couples counseling before you get married. And I remember, as we were going through that experience, one of the questions they asked is, ask about each of your parents and their history and anything that happened, that's significant of mention. I said, well, we moved out with my mom when I was like 5. My brother and I did, into an apartment. At 5 is an age where you're discovering and deciding if the world is a safe place. And even if it's only for 3 months, when you are removed from the only home you have known, and you are removed out of that home where the safest person in your life was, that is traumatic. And I internalized that experience. We realized that counseling is our one of our pastors said something I hadn't really heard before that just deeply resonated. He said, often when there's chaos in a home environment, kids pick up like one of a couple personas and responses to handle the stress. There's kids that become the golden children, where they're like, okay, I see that chaos and that mess, and I'm just going to be good all the time. I'm going to follow the rules and I'm going to get good grades. I'm not going to cause any more chaos. And then there's another response, which is like the diffusing bomb, which was like what my brother became, where you're going to be the one who kind of acts out, and you're going to distract from that energy of that chaos, and you're going to bring it back on yourself, and you're going to be the one so that they can be distracted from their dysfunction and just focus on whatever you're dealing with. And so we both sort of carried these separate personalities as children. We're both like, well, I mean, he's, married, he's got 3 kids, very successful at the work that he does. He's, turned out fine and healthy and whatnot. But, we weren't really processing any of this as it was happening. And again, that internalization, that suppression of emotion I don't ever remember talking to anyone about feeling scared about what was happening or being sad or being worried. No one ever asked me. They were just figuring out how to function. They didn't have the capacity, and I don't blame them for that. They also didn't have the capacity to like know that what they were doing was potentially having a negative impact on us. But the gift in all of that is that a year and change later, they realized, they said, we can't live with each other and we can't live together, and so they made a decision to get back together and to renew their vows. And they had a ceremony, and my mom wore a dress, and it was in a family friend, beautiful backyard. And there were probably 50 or 60 guests, and I was the flower girl. And my brother was the ring bearer. And, we got this gift of seeing our parents recommit to each other and to redeem and restore their marriage. So the gift in all of that, this is why I look back and I say, like, I wouldn't undo any of it, because the gift in that is it showed me that you can go through really hard things as a couple. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's healthier that people split and they stay separated. And sometimes that's the healthier route. But in the case of my parents, it worked out, and they got back together, and they did really, really, really hard work through therapy, lots of therapy, to get to a place where they were healthier together. And they were going to be celebrating 42 years of being married this summer. And they now help couples at their church that are really struggling. And now my husband and I have gone through couples like trainings, communication trainings with my parents, with the couple whose work saved their marriage in the 90s. And now we've all been in the same room together, getting trained by that couple. And then we have co-facilitated couples communications workshops with my parents. So it's like full circle redemptive moment that can only be appreciated in the context of how it originated, which was through brokenness, through a mess that got turned into something productive. So, 42 years, man. I'm like, got 32 to go to get there.
So, Rachel, now you're on this journey. You speak about things. What do you speak about?
I speak about a number of things. I speak about unmuting yourself, like using your voice to ask for what you want at work, to ask for help, to speak up when you're struggling, to celebrate your strengths, to be courageous and put yourself out there, because, there's people that are less qualified than you are, whoever's like, that are doing the thing you want to do, not because they're any better than you at it, but because they just decided to bet on themselves and believe in themselves. And so I try to bring in messages of practical inspiration. Oh yeah, I can't wait. Our next live stream show. A mental note. I'm going to mention that in a second. So I talk about that. I talk about unmuting yourself. I talk about resilience and navigating change, which is the main thing people have been bringing me in to speak about. How we can move through all the uncertainty we're in the midst of and do it with better and stronger and more resilient mental health and emotional health, and how we can better regulate our emotions and show up in a more responsive instead of reactive state in our interactions with people. Show up with greater consciousness and curiosity and compassion are three things I often talk about with groups of leaders. And helping, I talk about beating burnout and moving from fried to flourishing. And everything I talk about at its core is about how do we optimize our minds? How do we optimize our careers? How do we optimize, relationships? How do we optimize our aspirations? So it's a lot about kind of optimizing, and the through line through a lot of it as well is the sense of connecting to ourselves, connecting to each other, connecting to purpose, connecting to meaning. My goal is always that people walk away with a shift in perspective and with practical, actionable steps that they can take to actually put that perspective, that new perspective into action, as opposed to just walking away like, that was an inspiring story. Now what?
How do they put that perspective into action?
I mean, it depends on the topic. Like, so for instance, it might be if it's about unmuting yourself, a step that I might suggest people to take would be, hey, I specifically ask for feedback from a group of, small people that a few people, small group, a few people that know you well, and ask them, hey, tell me about a time. You could do this through email. Tell me about a time when you've seen me at my best. Like what qualities showed up, what strengths emerged. I'm doing some personal and professional development, reflection, and research, and you're somebody who knows me well, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Send email 6 to 8 people, 10 people if you want. Emails start coming back in. Print them out, highlight, mark up notes. What do you notice of the common themes that emerge? These are likely reflections of the genius or brilliance that you have to offer the world. So like that's an example of a practice of letting other people around us reflect back what they see to help us inform to help us increase our confidence about what we do well. That's like one example. But in every session I do, depending on what the topic is, I'm always giving people, here's a practical step that as soon as you walk out of this thing, you can go do that. And I find that, people are hungry for that. And there's always connection. I'm really big on interactive experiences that allow people to get into small groups and to share stories with each other and to feel validated and to feel less alone and to connect with one another and then come back to the large group, so easy to do virtually. And then come back to the large group and we invite some voices to share their stories and people develop a whole new level of connection and respect for their coworkers when they hear their stories. And so it's just a really powerful
Empathy.
Yeah, empathy. I mean, they inspire me, the groups that I get to work with. I'm really inspired by the stories that they share about the brave things they've done, and I just get to set the stage as a facilitator and a speaker. I get to set the stage. A group will only go as far as you can only take a group as far as you have gone yourself. And I have a lot more work to do, but I've also done a lot of work. And so I can be with a group and guide them through conversations that'll, unlock what I hope is transformational. And people have walked away and made significant life changes as a result. I mean, people have left jobs, people have asked for changes in their jobs, people have, it's been people. I slept better. One woman heard me speak at an event. I was doing an event at a major global consulting firm about beating burnout. And she reached out to me on LinkedIn 48 hours after the event and was like, I've already made a huge change in my life. I just want to thank you. I was like, that was like a 50-minute session. Like, what did you do? I didn't even meet her in the room. It was a room of like 200 people. I didn't even actually meet her in person. And I was inviting them to reflect on, who gets the best of you and who gets what's left of you. As somebody who gave my leftovers to everybody in my life that mattered for quite a period of time. And she said, I really thought about that. And I went home and I asked my partner, I talked to him about it. And she said, we have a son and my work required me to travel a lot between, state in the South and in the mid-Atlantic. And it was a lot. Travel was a lot. And so I talked to my boss and I asked for a change in my role so that I could just be stationed in the mid-Atlantic and not have to travel so I could be with my family more. And my boss said, yes.
Needed that encouragement from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and she said,
I hate to interrupt you, Rachel.
Closing.
We're on a roll and this flow going, but it is 9:01. And how about I quickly let you, share what makes Rachel proud of Rachel, and we end the show. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm just proud of how willing I am to do the work and how willing I am to be in uncomfortable moments for the sake of growth. And I'm proud of the way that I show up and encourage other people, even if I'm having a hard time, and that I've discovered how to be honest, and I'm going to have on February 7th, I'm having my next guest, Miguel Olave, on my live stream show, Unmute Yourself, which is every other Monday at noon Eastern. And we're going to be talking about mental health. So we're going to dig into that topic more. And I can't wait for that. So, lots of good things coming. And I'm just proud of how I keep putting myself out there too. So
awesome. Well, Rachel, all good things, they do come to an end. So I am so appreciative and so grateful for you being here, and for enriching my life, and for leaving me, more knowledgeable, and I think a better and more informed person. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to remove you from the stream. All right. So, of course, we did go over, and but I thank you all for being here. And the show is just about sharing stories, and I just hope we can touch lives. If something is was shared on this show, and you feel that there is something that helps you, do send me an email at vip@simadillon.com. And if you feel the show can help someone, do share it. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of my journey. And take care, and let's end the show. Here goes.